My name is Nancy, and my job at Kingham is development and alumni relations. And I've spent the last year just getting to know alumni. I didn't think that that would be such a major part of my job, but it is. And that's been the pleasure for me, is getting to know the stories of the Hill. My own son, Henry, joined Kingham when he was in year 7, and he was 11. And to be honest, we chose the school just because it felt right. I had no idea about the history of Kingham, and I had no idea about the goodness of the legacy of the founder and what we did for so many kids over the years. Kingham is this special place with all kinds of stories of kids that came to the school because they needed help. And the school, the trust, the founder helped to pay for the kids to come to school, and it became their home for many years. It's crazy as a mom that I didn't know this when I chose the school for my son, but then when I joined in alumni and development, I realized and started to uncover the stories through my role. And the tagline that I always say unofficially is, Kingham, it's better than I thought. And it is. So it's this amazing place that gives kids a place to pause and to figure out who they are and to learn life skills and to become these amazing men and women in more recent years. But the men that I've met over this last year are amazing. And it's almost like there are sleeper cells of alumni out there. So, there's a certain culture of the boys from Clyde in the 60s and 70s under Rodney Chapman. And there's the personality of the guys from the 70s and the rock and rollers and, the guys that are a little bit edgy and rebellious. And then there are the guys in the 50s that showed up at school when they were young and marched up the hill in their shorts and learned everything from how to cook to churn the butter on the farm to fix an engine, sew, repair shoes. And these guys all have amazing stories and such grit and kindness. And to me, that's what Kingham's all about, and that's what I want for my son.
I arrived in the summer of 1963, which was an odd time to come up to the Hill, so I think I was the only new boy at that time, and I was put into Plymouth for that term, which actually was probably quite a good start. A lot of quite wild kids down there, and from different parts, from Liverpool, from all over the place, and boisterous as ever. And so I had to find my feet fairly quickly because they'd all been bedded in for the previous part of the year. And then the following year I went up to Clyde, the senior house as it felt at that time. Again, quite sort of intimidating initially, but I think was very fortunate there in having a group of mates to share life with, and really quite an intense and strict regime under Rodney Chapman, who actually really wanted the best for us, but it was pretty tough and pretty competitive in the way that he ran things. And for example, getting up at 5:30 in the morning to go and do gym practice for the house gym competitions. Then after that, and maybe later on in the afternoon, we would have games which might be rugby or hockey as they had at that time, and possibly even a run or something like that. Maybe not the same day, but on the next day. And in between it, all the work that we did going up to top school and in those large, rather cold classrooms, some of which you got into directly from the outside. And the Hill is a pretty exposed place, as everybody who's been there knows. In the winter months, you get the wind whipping across the top, snow drifts. And in the dormitories, the three, the junior dorm, middle dorm, and the senior dorm, with about 9 kids in each of those, 9 or 10, and the window's wide open. So if you're beside the window, you've got plenty of fresh air, but possibly the wind, the rain, and even the snow sort of blowing in through that. Life was strict, as I mentioned. We had to polish our shoes, do all the housework in the morning. In fact, actually, looked after by the monitors. We were supervised to polish the floors, dust every last little shelf. So the houses really shone. I remember those terrazzo floors and the Roanoke and the smell of those materials there. Then up to the dining hall for breakfast, then to chapel after that, and then we had all the lessons until we came finally through to lunchtime, and either more classes later on in the afternoon or otherwise sports. So it was a pretty active life. And then getting back to the house at maybe 5 o'clock. Pretty starving by that stage. I seem to remember that we had snacks. We had these Vesta rice curries that people boiled on the single sort of ring and making cups of coffee and all the rest of it. So we had a bit of time then too before going up to supper. And then juniors, middles and seniors finally, prefects, the last to go up to bed at 10 o'clock in the evening. Quite an intense time from beginning of term to the end of term. And because of the size of the school at that stage, you usually found yourself participating in pretty well everything that went on. So, from your schoolwork to the sports, whichever it was, whether it's rugby, hockey, in my case in the summer months swimming. I wasn't much of a cricketer. Also athletics. So you got fairly heavily involved in everything. The clubs that took place, the engineers clubs, the photography club, the farmers clubs that were at that time, and then the Octagon Debating Society. So I don't remember there being very much time. The only thing I do recall are those Sunday afternoons after chapel when on a brilliant summer's day or in the early spring when it was warm and dry and you could go and walk out into that marvellous countryside. And it usually accumulated with somebody pulling out a transistor radio and listening to Top of the Pops at the end of the afternoon. And that, in a way, sort of signified that tuneful byline, the last vestiges of those long summery afternoons, and that you'd head back up to house and then tea. And then the whole evening bedtime regime, getting your books and prep and everything else in order for the week ahead. Well, there were plenty of things that the teachers never knew about. There were 3 guys who kept motorbikes hidden away in a shed or in a barn somewhere or other. And in my last summer term, my sister was studying art in Oxford. And we climbed out through the night loo and down over the roofs and collected the motorbikes and then rode into Oxford in the middle of the night. And we met up with friends. We had a wild time, exploring different parts of town and meeting other people until it began to get a little light. And we thought, hell, we better get going again. And we always got stopped at this roundabout on the north side of Oxford where the police were checking cars and motorbikes to make sure they hadn't been stolen. So we were stopped. Fortunately, the guys that I was riding with had all their papers there until it was about sort of 6:30. And we'd been kept there, questioned for half an hour or so. And then one of the officers turned around and looked at his watch and said, "You get up at 7 o'clock, don't you? You've only got half an hour." And we were about 30 miles or so away, so we had just a terrifying ride back across the countryside, disposing of the motorcycles very rapidly, creeping through the bushes and then climbing back up over the escape ladders, through the night loo, pulling the chain just to meet the housemaster coming up to wake the house up as he was walking down the corridor in the opposite direction. But actually trying to stay awake for the next day was really the worst part of it. And we were propping our eyes open, so we only did it once or twice. But I do remember my girlfriend coming over from Holland and staying in Stowe in the Wold and meeting up there in the middle of the night. It was quite fun, but fairly nerve-wracking as well at the same time, because the consequences of anything being discovered or going wrong could have been quite severe.